You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for being here today. I'm Kirk Mona, and joining me are Rachel Gimza and Victoria Thompson. We're all naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders, just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Good to see you guys.
Here. Woo!
Yeah, we're all here this week, and I get to start things off.
Let's go.
It's a relatively well-known factoid that white cats are often born deaf. I don't know if you guys have heard this one.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Particularly white cats with blue eyes. This was actually observed by Charles Darwin, probably other people as well, but
Yeah.
Darwin wrote about it. And it's definitely been confirmed since. One study found that 72% of their sample, a sample size of 85 white cats, were totally deaf.
Wow.
I learned about this as a child, and I found it really interesting and mysterious. It seems so strange.
What's the correlation?
Why
Right.
would the color of an animal's fur or eyes have anything to do with how well they hear?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it is not only cats. White coat color and blue eyes have been linked to congenital deafness in various types of animals, including rabbits, mink,
Interesting.
llamas, among other animals.
Wow. So this is a deep-seated thing.
Yes. And in several other animals, deafness is linked to piebald coloration. That's like patches of white with another color. So if you think of like a pinto horse.
Yeah.
It's where the word it's where bald eagle comes from. Is actually piebald eagle.
Oh,
black and
yeah.
white.
Exactly. There you go. And in some breeds of dogs, deafness can be associated with white or piebald coloration. And at least in piebald horses.
Dalmatians, it's more common.
Yes, Dalmatians also. Yeah, definitely.
Maybe you're going to get to this. I just have a quick question that came to mind. Is this mean that these animals are born deaf or more likely to develop like hearing loss later on?
My understanding is they're born deaf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this was interesting. So in piebald horses, at least, I don't know if this is true for other types of piebald animals. Deafness is more common if the white patches appear on the face and head versus the rest of the body. Again, this all seems so weird. Why could this be?
Yeah.
And the answer has to do with the genes that are associated with the white coat color.
Sure.
Being also associated with deafness, as you would expect.
Okay.
But the reason is that these genes code for the development of certain cells that are called melanocytes.
Okay.
And these are cells that produce melanin, which, melanin is the main pigment that's responsible for brown or black coloration in skin and hair in mammals and other vertebrates. But in these white animals, there are gene variants that interfere with the normal development of melanocytes, and the white animals basically don't have them. In piebald animals, expression is patchy, so they appear in some parts of the body, but not others. So I just want to take a moment, step back and clarify here that we are not talking about albino animals.
Right.
Albinism is something different. Albino animals actually do have melanocytes, but they don't produce melanin.
Right.
You got the right type of cell, but it's not making the pigment.
It's not working versus not having that type of cell at all.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So what does this have to do with deafness? Well, it turns out that there are melanocytes in the inner ear.
What?
Huh.
Yes.
Okay.
They're
That's
exact.
not where I thought this was going to go.
No.
Wow.
Well, it's been known for like 200 years that there are dark-colored cells inside your ear, but only relatively recently have they been kind of untangling how they work, and it's pretty hard to explain and sort of a little unclear. But they do seem to be important. They have to do with the production and like movement of what's it called? I'm going to mess this up. It's the fluid in your ear.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
biological name for it that I've forgotten.
Okay.
Medical name for it.
That's
But the
fine.
fluid is
Fluid
like
in
what
the ear
transmits
works just great.
Yeah, the fluid inside your inner ear is what transmits the sound waves.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And so if you don't have melanocytes, like it's possible, like depending on possibly what other genes might be involved, it's a little unclear, like you might wind up with deafness. So in the animals that have this white or piebald coloration caused by one or more of these genes, there are no melanocytes in the inner ear. And that's what's going on. And albino animals and people are not typically deaf because they actually do have melanocytes, even though they're not producing melanin.
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Are you with me too, Rachel? I know it's
here.
a little confusing.
I'm here. I get it.
Okay. So speaking of humans, some of our listeners, and you guys, I don't know, might be wondering how this can affect humans, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in a few ways. So this was really interesting when I found this. There's a human autoimmune disorder called vitiligo. You may have heard of.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it gradually causes patches of paler skin to appear on a person's body. Basically, the immune system is attacking melanocytes in the body.
Right.
And estimates vary. This affects possibly like 1% of the U.S. population. It's not always diagnosed. It's a lot more likely to be diagnosed if you start off with a much darker skin tone, as you can imagine.
Sure. Yeah, it's more noticeable.
Yeah, for sure. This disorder gained some prominence after Michael Jackson revealed that he suffered from it, and this
I was about to be like,
thinking
didn't he have it? Yeah.
Yes, the significant lightening of his skin tone over the course of his life was apparently due to vitiligo.
Okay.
Here's the connection. Less well known and still being kind of characterized is that people with vitiligo are more likely to have hearing loss, somewhere between 12% and 38%.
Fascinating.
Huh.
Because the immune system that's attacking those melanocytes is not just doing it in the skin, it's also doing it in the inner ear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That is like sad, but that's fascinating.
Yeah. And this can also happen apparently in people with melanoma, which is the worst kind of skin cancer. And this is apparently a kind of cancer where there can be an immune response against the cancer, but it's not attacking only the cancer, it's basically attacking all melanocytes.
Okay.
Once like the cancer appears in the body. So that can also affect the hearing.
Fun.
And then finally, there is a genetic disorder that I'd never heard of called Waardenburg syndrome, which affects many of the same genes that affect melanocyte production in other animals. And people with this syndrome, among other features, often have very bright blue eyes, or sometimes one blue and one brown eye, called heterochromia.
Mm-hmm.
And they sometimes have patches of white hair or pale skin, and have a high incidence of hearing loss. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just thought this was such an interesting topic. It came at it in a roundabout way via another topic that I may eventually get around to talking about.
Yep.
But I just thought it was such an interesting little rabbit hole where two things that at first don't seem at all related, or is like they shouldn't be related, turn out to have this underlying connection in the body.
Huh.
That's wild. I was thinking it was going to be like that the genes for one were close to the genes for something else, and it was totally, because that happens sometimes where it's...
That is what I thought at first too, but no.
Now, did you say that the cells don't make the fluid? Is that what's going on?
No, there are no cells.
Right.
No, so they're not the only cells that make the fluid. It's not that the fluid doesn't exist, but like...
Okay.
I don't understand exactly. I don't think scientists really fully understand why.
So I was like, couldn't you just inject some fluid in your ear and you could magically hear? But it's more complicated than that. Okay, good.
Okay.
Wow.
My sources this week were an article called Prevalence of Vitiligo Among Adults in the United States. That's from JAMA Dermatology from November 2021. Also, an article in Frontiers in Veterinary Science about the genetics of deafness in domestic animals. Got information on Waardenburg syndrome from Medline Plus, and some information on horse deafness from Equine News.
Cool. Thanks,
Nice.
Victoria.
Shout out to my mom's white cat Peggy when she was growing up. Though I don't know if
Peggy
could have heard the shout out. So
Yeah.
All right, on that note, we're gonna take a little break, and when we come back, we'll hear something from Kirk.
there it is. Hey everyone, welcome back from our little break there. Last week I talked about some new research on ancient wasps. And I want to report on some new, I guess it's not quite research, it's sort of an interesting observation this week. It has something to do with, also has to do with something small, but much bigger than a wasp. It has to do with one of my favorite groups of birds, the hummingbirds.
Oh yeah.
There are definitely not as many hummingbirds as there are wasps. There was millions of species of wasps. So we believe there's about 360 species of hummingbirds on Earth. Still a pretty good number.
Yeah.
A lot less than a million.
Kirk,
Yeah.
I just saw an article about something very fascinating about a certain hummingbird species, and I wonder if this is
maybe
the same
may be
thing.
it.
I
Yeah.
briefly considered doing it.
Oh, that's so close.
So close. So I will be talking about hummingbirds. And it's amazing to me that we can know so little about something. Like there's so few hummingbirds, but there's still mysteries out there to
there's
learn
350.
about. So our story today takes us to a place 360.
360.
Our story today takes us don't forget those last 10. The story takes us to a great place to see hummingbirds, perhaps a place that Victoria was thinking of, Panama. And here's the thing. There are 59 species of hummingbirds in Panama alone, which makes me extremely jealous. As I live up here in Minnesota, where we have a grand total of one species of hummingbird, the ruby-throated hummingbird. A rufous hummingbird theoretically can show up here once in a while if it gets lost, but they don't live here. We have one species. Yeah. So it is in this hummingbird-rich paradise, of course I'm referring now to Panama, not Minnesota, that we meet the U.S. National Science Foundation fellow, Jay Falk. And he's been studying hummingbirds for over a decade with a specific focus on one species, the white-necked Jacobin. And don't let the name fool you. This is indeed a hummingbird. There's actually two species of hummingbirds that are known as the Jacobins. They are the white-necked Jacobin and the black Jacobin. These were both named by French naturalist Charles Lucien Bonaparte, who was Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew. So it's kind of a fun little thing there. And it's actually thought that the name refers to the Jacobin monk's classic hooded robe. And it's hard to find illustrations, but the ones I was able to find online show like an outfit that is a sort of your classic black hooded cloak or dark hooded cloak with a matching cowl on top. But then, and this is key, white robes under that. So the cloak is literally just like a cape, sort of, right? So you got the white with the black over it. And I gotta say, that's pretty much exactly what the white-necked Jacobin looks like. They don't have a white neck. It's more of a white breast and white belly, but dark wings and back, and then a dark hood. So it happens to be a perfect match. And the color is actually more of like a dark iridescent blue instead of black, but from a distance, you don't always pick up on that. Instead, actually the gorget, like in the front there, also is that especially iridescent throat patch, is also sort of an iridescent dark blue. But nonetheless, pretty good name. But in spite of the creative name, these are hummingbirds, just like all the other hummingbirds. In fact, if you don't like that name, it's also called the collared hummingbird as well. So I'm sure there's other names in various languages as well. Yay for the vagaries of common names. So let's get more scientific here. This species we are talking about is the Florashuga mellivora, and the name basically means honey-eating sugar sucker, or I guess it's sugar-sucking honey eater, actually. The genus comes from... The genus does actually come also from Charles Lucien Bonaparte, as mentioned above, but the species epithet actually comes from Carl Linnaeus when he was doing his work that we've talked about on the show, coming up with the cataloging with the binomial naming structure we use today. So the initial naming of this bird actually predates it having a scientific name. All right, enough of my nerding out over names and nomenclature. I
never
apologize.
Will. Stop. It's all amazing.
Look, I'm a huge nerd. I like stuff like that. Tell us the weird part. You're all yelling at me. So here we go. Let's get back to Jay Falk. So this guy had been studying these birds for over a decade, but he was only studying the adults. And if that seems strange to you, consider that nests are hard to find. And people also tend to specialize in their skills. An example is that I'm a federally licensed bird bander. I study birds, but I really only study the adults. They're the ones that fly into my nets and into my traps. It's a lot easier than going out and trying to find nests and then banding the birds in the nests. They're very small. Your timing has to be impeccable. You have to band the birds in the nest. Like, they have to have legs large enough to put the bands on, but also be an age where they're not going to grow any bigger, but not so old that they're going to leave the nest or will like jump out when you band them and stuff. So it's a really small window of time. And when it comes to this guy, Jay, after a decade of studying these birds, he finally decided to look in their nests. And this wasn't because he wasn't interested in looking in their nests before. It's that he'd never seen one of their nests. No one had ever found one of their nests, basically. And so even though he'd been studying them for a decade, he'd never seen the nest. But he did get a chance to finally look in a nest. The nest had been discovered by discovered in Soberania National Park by Michael Constanzo Diaz and Sebastian Galen Giraldo, who were also working for the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, like Falk. And they told him about this nest they'd found along this road. And he's like, oh, yes, I want to go, take a close look at this nest. And so his advisor came with him, Scott Taylor. And when they looked into this nest, they saw something strange. Now, they knew a female hummingbird was repeatedly coming back to the nest, supposedly to feed her young. Right. But when they looked inside, instead of a bird, what they saw was a hairy caterpillar.
What?
Yes. This is totally the story I was thinking about doing. I was looking at it today.
Scooped you on it there. So
I have no idea. This is exciting.
I know. We've talked a bit on the show about caterpillars and their irritating or urticating hairs. And I recently talked about how they can get in your eyes and cause all kinds of pain and havoc. We also talked about how painful they can be if they just get into your skin or your mouth or your esophagus if you were to eat them. So some of these hairs can even contain toxins to repel would-be predators. And that's just, fascinating in its own right. We've talked about that on the show. In nature, a hairy caterpillar is a giant stop sign for most predators. So seeing one in the nest likely at first had them a little alarmed. This could be something harmful to have in the nest with your delicate, tiny, tiny baby bird. On closer inspection, however, they discovered that there wasn't a caterpillar at all. What they were seeing was the baby hummingbird itself. And these were not hairs, they were feathers. Yes.
Oh.
So this is so cool. I know. To back up a bit, birds can be born either with or without feathers. And these are not like the beautiful, long, sleek feathers of adults that are used for flight. These feathers, if they have them at all, are wispy, small feathers that are initially used just for like maybe probably a little bit of warmth, right? And
make them look like Muppets.
It seems that it does make them look like Muppets, yeah. And it seems that this evolution has played an interesting role in the coloration and style of feathers on this particular species of hummingbird. So when they're young, they are extremely vulnerable in the nest, as you can imagine. They are a nice bite-sized little snack. And over time, as animals need to decide if it's safe to eat the baby bird, they probably chose the ones that looked the least like a fuzzy caterpillar, as those were the safest to eat. And if it looked like maybe resembled a caterpillar in any kind of way, shape, or form, you go for something else first. And if you repeat that process a few billion times, eventually the feathers on the baby bird start to look more and more like the hairs on a caterpillar, as those genes are essentially selected for by the predators. So this is just so amazingly cool that evolution has selected for a baby bird that basically looks like a little poisonous caterpillar.
That's amazing.
Which is crazy. Nuts. But the story doesn't stop there. There's more to it. It gets a little weirder. So the researchers were watching this nest, right? And a large, here we go, carnivorous wasp visited the nest. And the chick must have known it was there. And what they observed was that when this predator was nearby, the chick shook its head or kind of jerked its head upward in a way that seemed to mimic how caterpillars move.
Yeah.
And so this actually even then increases the illusion of it being a caterpillar. So it's very possible that not just a physical, physiology was selected for over millions of years, but also a behavior. Yeah, which just is absolutely fantastic. It's such an amazing example of evolution in action. We do know of at least one other time this has happened. There's a South American species of bird known as the Cineris mourner that also has chicks that look like caterpillars. But we thought that was the only one before this. So we really don't know if there's other hummingbirds that have the same quirk. It probably wouldn't work for a goose or something. They're younger, far too big to be mistaken for a caterpillar.
Yeah. What a wild thing it would be.
A lot of birds start out with their chicks hatch out. They're so small. So many songbirds and stuff have such small eggs. So this is very, very cool. And we don't really know if other hummingbirds do this because their nests are so hard to find. So there could be other ones out there waiting to be discovered that also have the same adaptation. So that's really all I have this week. It's just a quick story about hummingbird babies disguised as caterpillars. People, we live in a deeply weird world.
Oh, yes.
Don't we? I, for one, am here for it. My source this week was singular. As I mentioned, these people all work for STRI, that's the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, and this discovery was reported in an article by Rosanet Quesada Hidalgo in Smithsonian Magazine just recently in March of 2025. Sorry, Victoria, for scooping you on this story. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll find out what Rachel has for us.
All organisms, to some degree, are intelligent problem solvers. It's just they've evolved to solve different kinds of problems.
And whole ecosystems of working together, that's an intelligent social phenomenon.
For all the talk about the age of information, we're really entering the age of nature. Nature's Genius is a new podcast series from the Bioneers. It explores how the solutions we need are present in the sentient symphony of life. Starting February 18th, wherever you get your podcasts.
So when this particular episode comes out, you both already know about this, but I will be deep in a different set of woods, and I'm so excited, so I want to talk about it.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yes. When this particular episode comes out and is published, I will be in the Redwoods National Park. Kirk, you talked about them a little bit way back in episode 89, but you mostly focused on the relationship.
Did I?
You did a little bit. I went back and listened.
I did. Yeah, with the birds.
It was the stellar jays and the marbled murrulets that you talked about. You're mostly looking at that relationship. And And
Yeah.
actually, I went back and I listened to make sure I wasn't like covering anything you didn't, and found out that you mostly just talked about the birds, which tracks.
Shocking.
And
yeah. I like trees too.
But I like trees too. But I said in that episode that I wanted to go, and I'm so proud to be fulfilling past Rachel's dream. So rest assured, I am currently there, everyone, with my best friend and listener and patron of the show, Amanda. We're both there. We're both very excited. We're going to be deep in the woods. So, but let's dive into these massive trees.
Will you be putting photos on our Instagram account of some of those trees?
Oh, 100%.
I hope so.
Well,
Awesome.
You will get a picture of me next to one of these trees, and good luck, because
all 5'4" of you.
All right? 5'4" of me next to one of these trees is gonna be nuts. It's really funny when I was very much a side note. When I was doing research about this particular topic, it was that they said you will take pictures of these trees, try to capture how tall and large they are. You will fail. I'm like, okay, you can't.
Yes.
So we're going to try, but it won't be successful. So what are we talking about when we say redwoods, right? So there are 3 subgenre which are located in different spaces. There's the coastal redwood, which is located around along the coast of California and Oregon, in the very southwestern part of Oregon. There's also the giant redwood, also known as the giant sequoia, which is in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. And the dawn redwood is also another species which is native to China. And there's been actually a lot of debate on whether
people
or not...
People often forget about the dawn redwood.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of debate on how they're related or not, actually, when it comes to like where they break off in the taxonomy behind it. So we're not going to get into the dawn redwood at all. We're mostly going to be talking about the coastal redwoods today. Also, another wild thing.
Yeah.
These are the trees that were more prevalent when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. For some of the first fossilization evidence of redwoods comes from over 200 million years ago in the Jurassic period. So, they've been around a while.
All right.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It's just 1 or 2, and those are the ones that I'm going to see are the coastal redwoods. And we're going to save the giant sequoia for another day because it truly deserves its own episode. Coastal redwoods are cypress.
Coastal, yeah.
Are cypress trees, which means that they are an evergreen gymnosperm. They produce cones. All right. So they're pretty typical, like an evergreen tree. Think of like a Christmas tree or something, except don't. Because they're cypress trees, so think of like a juniper tree.
A cypress.
A cypress also is a great way to think about them. Now, these are the tallest trees that are still alive and around on the planet. They can reach up to the current record holder is Hyperion, and they can reach up to 300.1 feet in height. Which is
so ridiculous.
Mind-boggling.
Which is mind-bogglingly tall. Also is 115.9 meters. And this doesn't count their roots, by the way. This is from the base of their trunk up.
Yeah, that's a good point. They're pretty shallow rooted though, aren't they?
They kind of are. So I'll get into that in a second. They're okay. I'll just go into it now. Their roots, like you were saying, they only go, for how tall they are, they only go down about 10 to 13 feet deep, which granted is still deeper than I was expecting. It's 3 to 4 meters down, but for that tall of a tree is pretty intense. But they go outward and they intermingle with nearby redwood trees and their roots for 60 to 80 feet or 20 to 27 meters. And that provides a lot of the stability that allows them to be as upright as they are and as tall. Is one of the ways.
The strength of their team is the strength of their team.
Exactly, because they do actually share nutrients and such with each other as well as like structure and support. So very cool. Wildly, these trees, for as tall as they get, they grow really straight. Actually, they're pretty straight up and down. Most trees, especially a lot of pine trees and such, they'll like do random little curves and such. These won't. They go straight up. Their main trunk goes straight all the way up, and the top part of their tree is pretty much a cone, with the bottom kind of drooping down a little bit. They have a fibrous bark that, when exposed and fresh, is pretty reddish, hence the name redwood. And their bark can actually grow to be a foot thick before you hit any part of the cambium or anything, which is wild, but is a really amazing way that they are able to protect against fire, which I'll get into. They also have these flat leaves, very typical of a juniper cypress. They're scale-like. You wouldn't think, they're not like traditional like pine needles or anything. They're flat and scaly. We'll have pictures. But besides being so tall...
Like cedar.
Oh, yeah. Think cedar, exactly. Besides being so tall, they're actually really well adapted to being along the coast. So they tend to need really good moist soil and well-draining soil. But they also found a way to utilize the heavy fog that was pretty typical of that, and still is pretty typical of that habitat space. A lot of the times it gets really foggy along the coastline, and they actually use that. Because think about it, even when there's a lot of rainfall, if you are 300 feet tall and your needles are at the top of your tree and your leaves, so you can photosynthesize and do what you need to do and create cones, you have to get water from your roots all the way to your needles, all the way to your scales at the end of your, like, that is really, really hard. That's hundreds of feet. You're competing with gravity. So they actually developed a way to absorb fog. So they're able to absorb fog into their needles, into their bark, and completely bypass the xylem system. And the amount of water that they use and take in from fog is up to 40% of the water the tree uses in a year.
Oh, wow.
That is a lot.
I
didn't know it was
that's
so much.
way more than I thought it would be.
It is a lot, and they need a lot of water. So, and most of the time they're pretty stressed for water. So the fact that they're able to take in fog is amazing and super, super helpful. I didn't know that they could do that. So I was like, whoa, nuts. I said earlier too that they have a really thick bark, like up to a foot thick of bark. That helps them do a couple of different things. One, it helps them be really resistant to insect attacks. Now that foot thick bark is at like breast height. So like 5 foot in, 5 foot up. It's a foot thick, but obviously like you get up to the taller branches and the thinner branches, the bark itself is going to be thinner and such. But by having such thick bark, it does help protect the tree against insect attacks and helps them be more resistant to it, as well as fungal infections. It also is really resistant to rotting, which is wild. But because they're so resistant to insect attacks, when insects do attack, especially those more vulnerable branches, the tree won't die from an insect burrowing into it, especially if the tree is healthy. So that's really cool. In addition, because their bark is so thick, and fibrous, it actually allows them to survive wildfires better. It prevents with mature trees, it prevents them from burning down or getting damaged in a wildfire. And actually, it helps the redwoods become more abundant because they're really good at dropping down and like self-pruning their limbs that they aren't using anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And when they drop those down, that allows like some detritus and stuff to happen on the floor, but it prevents fire from being able to climb up the tree itself and get to the more vulnerable canopy level. So where the bark
probably
is
also
thinner.
encourages forest fires down low and kill other competition off then too, right?
Exactly. And that allows them to be able to grow and develop other like little sprouts and get more nutrients for themselves. So it's amazing. They're phenomenal. Now these trees get to be very long lived, and it's true. And while I mentioned earlier that they have they get to be really, really tall, these are just the old growth trees that we know of. We're the last one that was the tallest was discovered in, I think, 2008 or something like that. However, there were reports from when clear cutting was happening more often in the early 1900s, late 1800s, of even taller trees. But we can't verify those particular claims.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, were they tall trees or were they tall tales?
Exactly. So while these trees get to be pretty long-lived, they actually don't start developing seeds at all until they are at least 10 to 15 years old. And then once they start growing and continue, they can regularly grow to be at least 600 years old, with some of them growing to be more than 2,000 years old. The oldest is actually about 2,200 years old, which is insane. And for a tree that actually is so tall and so long-lived, their cones are pretty tiny, actually. Their cones are an inch long.
You think they're going to be huge?
You think they're going to be huge. Their cones are an inch long. And
oh, wow.
They only
you probably
hold
picture
a
like
few
a sugar
dozen
pine
seeds.
or something with a huge cone.
Right? No, they have really tiny cones with only a few dozen seeds within that cone. And they'll fall down until they grow. And if they do sprout, they can grow over a foot in a year. So they can be pretty fast growing at first, which is amazing. They also have the ability to sprout from the base of redwood trunks. And this happens pretty commonly, even if like the parent has been cut down or has died. Sprouts will still happen and utilize the nutrients and the roots that are there, which is really awesome because it gives you an advantage with that established root system.
Sure.
And this is something that I would love to talk more about because it was really fascinating. But Kirk, you talked a little bit about this with the relationship between marble and stellar jays, but the canopy of a redwood forest and of a redwood tree, coastal redwood, is actually teeming with life. It's a long way to fall, but there's a lot of animals that call that space home. Right. I wouldn't want to fall.
Yep.
But there's often a lot of detritus that happens along you get old leaves and things like that. So along the branch itself, there's a lot that actually can grow. There's actually soil that is created on the branches of the tree itself, and has created its own little nurse log of sorts where seeds and spores will actually live and grow on those branches. It supports ferns, mosses, huckleberries. It can even support other trees growing off of it. There's been a number.
Wild.
Isn't it wild?
That's amazing.
Like, no joke. Like, for example, one of the species that has been found to grow on a coastal redwood is a Sitka spruce. And they found them to be those little trees growing on a branch to be up to 40 feet Those trees growing on a coastal redwood, 40 feet going up.
Wait, a 40-foot, not 40 feet up, but a 40-foot tall tree growing on the 300-foot tall tree?
Yeah.
Outstanding.
What?
Truly insane. It's just a wild canopy full of, like, they're not the only type of tree to do this, but like that, just picturing a tree so big that another tree is growing on that tree and it has its own, like, there are salamanders that live up there, there are worms, there are other birds, there are insects that grow up that live their whole lives up in these trees. They're huge. They've been around for so long, and I'm so excited that I'm there currently, but not yet. It's just so exciting.
As you were listening to this, but not as we are recording it.
Exactly.
Yeah, she's going to come back and be like, you guys that went there, they totally sucked. I was wrong.
I was wrong. They were the worst thing I've ever seen. No, absolutely not.
I've seen the redwoods. You're not going to be disappointed.
I didn't think I would.
You were not going to be disappointed, Rachel.
No, you might not get me back.
They're super awesome.
But
I was enthralled.
You're going to Nature's Cathedral.
I'm so excited. I'm so stoked. Anyway, so I just wanted to do some more research on the redwoods. One, to get pumped about the trip, but also they're an insane tree that we haven't talked about at all, and they're the tallest tree ever. So my sources this week, there's an article in Tree Hugger, but I also used the USDA, Redwoods National Park, so the National Park Service, Wikipedia, and the Save the Redwoods organization. I had some good information. And that's what I have for y'all this week. So excited. That's it.
Fantastic.
That's the end of our show.
Very cool topic.
Big topic.
Big topic. We went from real tiny to real big. In the meantime,
we covered everything, yeah.
Yeah, we always do. It's wild. Oh. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. We will all see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach us by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can check out our website, strangebynaturepodcast.com, and you can support the show and get ad-free episodes at patreon.com/strangebynature. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.